Thanks, everyone. My name is Paul Makin. I'm the product director for the Mojaloop Foundation. Um, I was originally inspired to propose this presentation to James because uh, it, I've always felt there's a dearth of product-related documentation in the Mojaloop space. When I first started working with Mojaloop, however many years ago now, there was a huge amount of engineering documentation, greatly detailed documentation on every aspect of Mojaloop, but there was no higher level product-like documentation at all, which actually explained, at a high level how things worked. And I've been trying to correct that ever since. Um, I should explain, for me, product is kind of the interface between the engineering guys and business. So explaining engineering to the business and business to the engineering, etc. The oil in the works, as it were. So with that, I thought it'd be good if we could give a short intro on actually what the blocks of Mojaloop are and what the buzzwords are and what they mean, for any product managers out there who are tasked with adopting Mojaloop and are faced with all of the, as I say, all of the engineering documentation. So a starting point, if you like. So next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about the elements of a Mojaloop-based scheme. As I said, I'm going to talk about a few use cases, and then I'm going to hand over to our engineering director to talk about actually the deployment of Mojaloop and how you onboard a few banks or other DFSPs onto your system. And then finally, I'll close off with what are the next steps once you actually understand what a Mojaloop comprises. So next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, the core functions of Mojaloop. There are three, essentially, and there's a lot of more detailed sub functions, but these are the high level ones. First of all is payee address or alias resolution. So that's ensuring that first, the account holding institution for an individual can be identified, and from that, the correct payee account is reliably identified. This is an important step in ensuring that the money goes to the right place. And once you've established exactly who you're paying and where they want the money to go, you move on to clearing. So Mojaloop clears payments end to end. It includes robust measures that remove any element of doubt about the success of a transaction, and I'll talk about that more in a while. And that's a really important point, because if you can remove any element of doubt, that means you get fewer disputes, and disputes are where the cost of an instant payment system really lie. So we're very keen to drive down on that. And finally, the orchestration of the settlement of cleared transactions between financial institutions and according to a predefined schedule. That's where the money actually moves. So the clearing is just, saying the payer saying that they are definitely going to pay, and the payee being assured by both the payer and Mojaloop that the money is on its way. And there is an understanding there, usually in the scheme rules, that the payee DFSP will pay out to their customer straight away. Settlement is where the money actually goes to the payee DFSP at a later time. It might be hours, it might be days, depending on the particular circumstances. Next slide, please. So these are the key parts that we are all talking about all the time, and it's good to have clarity in what they mean. So at the center of it all is a Mojaloop hub that does that discovery, the clearing, and orchestrates the settlement. So off to the top right, you'll see settlement is actually carried out by a settlement partner. That might be through an RTGS, or it might be a commercial bank offering settlement, or it might be one of the new options that we're currently exploring around stablecoins, etc. The point is, the Mojaloop hub just decides what the settlement function should be and initiates it with a settlement partner. It doesn't do it itself. And then left and right, we have two DFSPs, which is the generic term for digital financial service provider, banks, MFIs, mobile wallets, SACCOs, etc. And each of those has their own system, their own back office. It might be a core banking system, it might be a messaging backplane, whatever it might be. And Mojaloop as a community provides integration tools to connect that back office into Mojaloop. And because we provide those integration tools, we're able to get the integration time for most DFSPs into a Mojaloop hub down to a couple of weeks, rather than the 6 months of many of the other switching options out there. And then down at the bottom, we have PISP, Payment Initiation Service Provider. And there we provide functionality for a fintech to connect to a Mojaloop hub. So effectively, the Mojaloop hub acts as an aggregator for every DFSP that's connected into the Mojaloop hub. The fintech integrates once into our PISP interface, and from there, they're connected to every DFSP. We provide a separate set of integration tools for the fintechs, or in actual fact, it might be a government or whoever it might be. Next slide, please. Yeah, can you go back one? Okay, there's a bit missing off this. I'm guessing somebody downloaded an earlier version. Anyway, the integration tools actually consist of two parts: a core connector, which connects into the back office, and a Mojaloop connector, which manages the connection into the Mojaloop hub, manages all the security and all the other aspects. There's more to it than that, but that's the basics. And on the core connector side, we have a library of core connectors which connect to most popular back office systems. They're freely available, and that's also where a systems integrator can customize use cases, for example, in that core connector space. So click again, please. Yeah, the three key phases of a Mojaloop transaction, and we think these are very important. The first phase is discovery, and that's I've already talked about. That's where we resolve an alias to a specific payee DFSP. The next, and we think this is very crucial, it's a USP for Mojaloop, I think. This is the agreement of terms phase. And this is when the two DFSP parties to the transaction agree that the transaction could go ahead, effectively. So, for example, if the payee account is subjected to tiered KYC, you can check that the proposed transaction wouldn't allow tiered KYC transaction limits or balances to be exceeded. Or you can validate that the destination account is in good standing. It might be disabled for some reason. And you can also, during this phase, agree the terms in terms of the fees between the two DFSPs. So once the two sides have agreed that the transaction can go ahead and that the accounts are both in good standing and can facilitate the transaction, it can proceed through the transfer phase. And that's when the transaction is cleared between the two DFSPs. And once the transfer has been accepted by the hub and the two DFSPs, it cannot be repudiated. So the transaction is final. There is no dispute which allows that transfer to be reversed. And we think that because of the discovery and agreement of terms phrases, there is actually no basis for the reversal of a transaction. So a reversal of transaction would have to happen in turn by the creation of a new transaction, and it's nothing to do with the failure of a Mojaloop transaction, for example, because that's already been agreed. Next slide. Yeah, onto the use cases. Thank you. Next slide. So we have some base use cases which are all around account-to-account funds transfer. And this assumes that the account is each account is held at a DFSP connected to the hub. And The movement of funds from one to the other is what we commonly refer to as a push payment. Mojaloop doesn't actually do pull payments, but there are workarounds to that. But it's a fundamental precept that we only do push payments, putting the control in the hands of the individual that is being debited. So this means at the most basic level, a Mojaloop hub directly supports the following use cases: P2P, P2B, which might include simple forms of merchant payments, business to business, business to government, and simple forms of P2G payments. So they're all basic account to account use cases. Next slide, please. There are a set of more complex use cases which use different functionalities. With these add additional features, and they're layered over the top of the core use cases, because at the heart of them all is an account to account transfer. But we have request to pay functionality, which can be used for merchant payments, for billing, for collections. It can also be used to implement a financial inclusion friendly form of mandates by putting the payer in control of that payment. There's cash services, so we can support cash in, cash out, cardless ATMs, and offline cash. An offline cash scheme would have to be managed separately, but the Mojaloop hub can at least perform the top up and redemption. Then 3PPI or PISP, I've already talked about, but there's a huge number of use cases that can use that functionality. Fintechs, governments, for payments, salary, bulk, and other services independently of the DFSPs. We have a very efficient implementation of bulk payments, and that can handle anything from a few payments within a payment list or millions, frankly, across multiple lists. And that's in support of pensions, social payments, salaries, nation scale payments that a government or a corporation might want to do. And of course, we now have with Mojaloop 17 cross-border with account to account and merchant payments. Also, Mojaloop supports the implementation of more complex use cases. An adopter might have a particular use case that is, or they feel is unique to them, particularly in complex P2G or G2P payments. And the Mojaloop software supports extension, particularly through the core connectors, as I said earlier on. Yeah, use case documentation. As I said at the start, there's been a gap in the Mojaloop documentation. We've had lots of detailed technical documentation, engineering documentation right from the start, and I'd encourage the engineers in the room to explore all that. But there was never really any product level documentation, and it is my mission to try and put that right, and I've started at least. And for example, you can see here there's a link to the product-led documentation on use cases, which is available on the Mojaloop website. There's a lot in there already, specific information on use cases. There's information on how we handle risk management and a whole bunch of other things. And it is actually my mission over the next couple of PIs to bring all of our product documentation up to standard. But this is one area where I think we're pretty much up to date. There are links in there to the full engineering documentation as well. But yeah, for those that are interested, essentially the further you click down in the product documentation, the further it gets away from business and down towards engineering. That's a general guide. So next slide. Perfect. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Paul. So I wanted to take you through some of the resources that we have available to guide you on your journey to deploying, building a Mojaloop-based scheme. Did I skip a slide there? I wonder. By accident? No, I think maybe not. So, software deployment. At some point, you're going to want to deploy the Mojaloop software. Before you start that, there's a couple of things you need to think about. You need to figure out where you're going to host the software, where it's going to run. There are several options open to you. You might choose some on-premises servers, firewalls, and networking in your own, or even a shared data center. You might choose public cloud, or private cloud, or some combination of any of the above, which is known as a hybrid deployment. We support deployment of Mojaloop, the entire software stack, across any of those. There's a lot of complex questions you need to answer before you have a really solid decision-making data set. We have resources in the Mojaloop community to help you answer those questions. Our go-to-market team are a very good resource. You can talk to at any level, and if they don't have direct answers themselves to guide you, they will be able to point you in the direction of the right people to ask in the Mojaloop community or within the Mojaloop Foundation. We do have a service provider directory, which is hosted on the Mojaloop website. You can see that in one of the links there on the slides. These slide decks will be shared with everybody publicly after this event, so you can follow that link. You don't have to write it down now. We also provide some recommendations and guidelines. You can see a link to some of the documentation there, which will help you figure out where you're going to deploy your software. And my clicker is once again failing me. Let me try the reboot once again. No. I have a dead clicker. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay. So there's a couple more questions you need to think about. You need to decide which use cases you're going to operate. This is very often a phased approach. In fact, it's very often sensible to start with some simple use cases, or even one simple use case, and build upon that. You also need to think about which type of account identifiers you're going to use. You will have heard a lot of discussion in some of the previous sessions this week, and maybe indeed some tomorrow, about how to identify accounts in a Mojaloop scheme. Once you've figured out what identifier types you need, that helps you identify which software components you're going to need to install. If you need help figuring out any of this, again, our go-to-market team in the foundation and our product team can help you. Again, there's a link to the service provider directory there. There's a number of people in the Mojaloop community who specialize in answering these kind of high-level scheme considerations. Armed with that knowledge, you can then decide which components you need to deploy, and that will be a combination of what you see on the screen there: Mojaloop core services, some supporting services depending on the use cases you want to operate. There's very often some additional services around the periphery of that core, and there's also platform management services. The exact list of things you're going to want to deploy will depend very much on your own situation, what skills and technologies you might already use in your organization or have particular preferences for. Mojaloop is very flexible in that respect. You can bring a lot of your own platform management technology along. And when it comes to actually deploying the software, many of you will probably be familiar with the basic software installation process on your laptops or your workstations, where you'll download a software installer. Things are slightly different in the Mojaloop world, but we offer a number of tools that you can think of as installers in some simplified way. We have a thing called a core test harness. We have a thing called Miniloop. We have some things called Helm charts. And we have something called infrastructure as code, which is often abbreviated as IAC. So if you hear us talk about Mojaloop IAC, we mean infrastructure as code. The core test harness, really the key use cases for this are for single users to deploy Mojaloop on a workstation or a laptop. It doesn't really use a lot of resource, so a mid to high-end laptop will be able to cope with most of the services to enable you to learn and develop features around Mojaloop. This doesn't require the container orchestration platform called Kubernetes that Mojaloop is designed to run on top of. But it's definitely not something you would want to use to expose to the outside world. Very much a testing and development platform here. Miniloop fulfills a very similar role, but it does actually deploy a kind of development version of Kubernetes on your workstation or your laptop, which enables you to get familiar with Kubernetes itself. Some organizations, some of you might have teams that know Kubernetes well, some of you may not. So this option is appropriate if you want to learn a bit more about the container orchestration platform that we use. And on top of that, Helm charts. Helm is just the name of the packaging software that we use to build the kind of bill of materials of services that we're going to install, that the installer will install. The Helm charts are used to deploy all the Mojaloop services onto one or more machines that are already running a Kubernetes platform. So the Helm charts will not install Kubernetes for you, but if you know enough to be able to create a Kubernetes, then Helm charts can help you install Mojaloop on top of that. Some of our adopters have used Helm charts to build production deployments of Mojaloop. In their case, they had a lot of internal capability, experience and expertise in securing that deployment and preparing it for production quality. And finally, we have our infrastructure as code. This is the kind of most complete installation system for Mojaloop. This deploys a complete Mojaloop infrastructure management platform on, like I said before, on either your own service or public, private, or some hybrid arrangement of cloud. This gives you the ability to manage multiple Mojaloop switch instances. Those of you familiar with carrier grade or telco grade infrastructure operation will be aware that, or even actually most common tech businesses these days will have more than one instance of their platform running at any one time. There's very often at least one development platform, a QA and test environment, and a production platform itself. So our IAC deploys a management control center, which allows you to create and manage a number of Mojaloop environments for those various purposes. It's designed out of the box to give you a deployment that's highly secure for production operation. And the resource requirement for this deploying Mojaloop in a production-like environment is actually quite variable, and it really depends on how much throughput you need the Mojaloop hub to be able to cope with. If you have relatively low throughput, a few hundred transactions per second or less, you can deploy it on a very small footprint of hardware, 3 or 4 mid to low level enterprise grade servers, and you can achieve a few hundred TPS. But most aspects of the platform are horizontally scalable, which enables you to add throughput capacity to your scheme as your traffic demand increases. And our IAC facilitates that. So now I wanted to point you to some of our participant onboarding and lifecycle management tools, again designed to simplify reduce cost, time and risk from the process of onboarding participants to Mojaloop-based schemes. So we have a set of open source documentation and tools to help that process. They range from things like business and technical integration, documentation, all the way up to a complete participant lifecycle management system that we call Mojaloop Connection Manager, MCM for short. We also provide SDK, software libraries, and the connectors that Paul already mentioned. So the system integrated toolkit I mentioned, this is designed for SIs who are working with stakeholders in DFSPs and Mojaloop-based schemes. And it provides comprehensive guidance to deliver a successful integration into a Mojaloop-based scheme. And the guidance is both technical and on business level concerns. And it covers most, if not all, of the factors of for a DFSP who's going to join an inclusive instant payment system. Our MCM platform, as I said, it really simplifies the business and technical processes of onboarding DFSPs to schemes. It provides a secure kind of wizard-style interface to walk users through the required steps for best practice, technical security connection and connection management, and it enforces best practice for cybersec, both for the hub operator and DFSPs. It's designed to work out of the box with all the other tools in the Mojaloop integration technology stack. Our SDK code library is a kind of off-the-shelf, tried and tested implementation of our connection security mechanisms and the transactional API flow security. It's kind of a how-to guide with a strong production quality tried and tested implementation of all of those security mechanisms. So even if you don't want to use the off-the-shelf Mojaloop toolchain to build your integrations, there's an exemplar instance of some code that you can read, follow and understand to help you implement your own integration. But we also provide something called a Mojaloop connector, which is based on the components in that SDK, which provides the hub side, a hub side abstraction of the complexities of integration, secure integration with a Mojaloop-based scheme, and that's a super flexible piece of software. Some of you who were at our previous Mojaloop community meeting in Rwanda will have seen a demonstration of that running on a very small single board PC, sub $100 cost, doing 10 transfers per second. But we also have, as Paul alluded to earlier, a library of off-the-shelf implementations of the core banking system connectors as well, the other side of an integration. And we have a growing set, a growing number of core backends that we support, from most of the common open source core banking platforms right the way through to the more complex proprietary systems that larger DFSPs like. So at this point, I'm going to hand back over to Paul to talk you through some next steps.
Yeah.
With you.
Yeah. Thank you, James. I think the point of these next few slides is to emphasize that it's not just about the technology, and how do you get from an understanding of the technology to actually a live production. We've classified 4 different types of deployment. We start off generally when with a new adopter with the concept of a proof of concept, which is the left-hand one. So it's generally minimal investment. So we tend to suggest it should be cloud-based deployment. There's no real money on it, so there's no issues around the ownership of the data or anything like that, because we refer to it as fake money on fake rails. So we generally use one use case, an account to account use case such as P2P. We encourage the integration with two or three friendly DFSPs in their test environments, not their production environments. And we simulate the operations at the hub. We only talk about the happy path. Regulators, we say, we although no regulatory approval is required for any of this, that's fine. But at this point, if you're talking about any kind of substantial deployment, this is the point where you need to start talking to the regulator, get them involved, make sure they're happy with what you're planning to do. The Mojaloop Foundation can actually execute much of the proof of concept for you, but in collaboration with your engineering teams. And then once everybody is happy that that's working well, with the in particular the two candidate DFSPs, two or three DFSPs, then decision point is then made, if you like, a gate to go to the next phase, and that's the pilot, where for the first time we start talking about real money, and there tends to be a limited access to customers. So this is what we call, we're all familiar with as the sort of family and friends deployment, where it's people that we can mess around if we need to. If we need to restart the system, for example, it's not production, so we can just experiment with things. We limit the number and the size of transactions per day based on your risk appetite, but maybe it's you limit it to a couple of $1,000s a day type of thing. All operations are manual, and settlement is in particular is manual. It's not linked into an RTGS or anything like that. Again, in order to limit cost at this stage, there's no redundancy. So if the system goes down, it goes down. It's not real anyway. And there's no uptime expectation. That's all about making sure that the integration is as real as possible, whilst limiting the expenditure in this phase, while in particular your development and engineering teams build up their expertise on running the system. Once that gate is passed, we can move on to full implementation. At this point, we expect that the regulatory approval has been received. It's real money, real rails. So full security, full redundancy, maximum uptime expectancy, no limitations on the number of DFSPs, a limited number of use cases to begin with, but at least two or three. And automated operations if possible, and in particular, direct interconnection with an RTGS if you're using an RTGS for settlement, or whatever other settlement mechanism you're using. But the point is, it should be automated. And then once that's all live and operational, you move into essentially business as usual, where you're adding new use cases, adding new DFSPs, and maintenance and improvements. So when Mojaloop V18 comes along, you upgrade to that at the appropriate time when you're ready for it. Just normal operations. So they're the four stages in the life cycle of a Mojaloop adoption. Adding a little more detail on that, can you move to the next slide? Yeah, and this is to again emphasize that this is not just about the technology. This is where, to be frank, myself as product director, I kind of leave it behind. This is the go-to-market team, and they've defined these 6 verticals. You'll have noticed that the verticals are all horizontal, but let's cross over that point. So it's governance. So you're defining your scheme rules, including ownership, governance, pricing, scheme decision-making, business case, policies, etc. All the stuff that is absolutely essential to get it work from a business perspective. Hub operations, so building the capacity of the hub operations team to actually operate it. And that includes actually important aspects of security. So making sure that all the control points are in place, and the supply chain management is in place, and that your operators are onboarded, and you've implemented the role-based access to your satisfaction, and make a checker where it should be. All of that good stuff. The support ecosystem, connecting the adopters to the service providers, training service providers and local fintechs, getting your procurement processes in place, connecting adopters to the broader Mojaloop community and the global partners who can actually provide you with support. On the product side, defining your platform requirements and implementing the Mojaloop platform to those specifications. And this specifically means customization of use cases to the particular needs of your country, your DFSPs. And then infrastructure, defining the infrastructure requirements and procuring the infrastructure. For a production environment, that almost certainly means on-premise. And I think, James, you referred to the horizontal scalability of the deployment. So starting off probably on a very small on-premise deployment with just a handful of servers, and then as making plans for the growth of that deployment across multiple data centers with multiple increased number of servers in each, so that you can flex across those services to meet the capacity and availability requirements of your service. The point being, you start small and grow as your service grows. Participation, all processes relating to the engagement, integration, onboarding of DFSPs, so they can be supportive and active participants. And in my view, the participants should also be at least consulted around the project governance stuff as well. But that's for you to decide as an adopter. Next slide, please. Yeah, governance. The overall goal is to set up a digital payment scheme that causes transformation in the payments ecosystem. And you've heard us talking about the desire to promote financial inclusion and to increase participation in the modern digital economy. And this, we think, is best achieved through setting up a level 1 aligned scheme and managing the project work effectively to deliver this efficiently and crucially for all stakeholders. Next slide, please. Hub operations. If you don't get your hub operations team working effectively and reliably, then that you won't have a payment switch that works. And it's about building the capacity of the team, but also it's building the policy and process frameworks. I always think that building those business processes, building the identifying the control points, and setting up your identity and access management system, and the role-based access, the make a checker, etc., etc. They're all essential to building a functional hub operations team. Next slide. The support ecosystem. Yeah, this is about supply chain management, and any good adopter is extremely keen on getting this right. So it's also about identifying support. I mean, the Mojaloop Foundation works hard to make sure that there is local support within your country, through the development programs that we have, through the training programs, and we're very keen that an adopter should keep their sovereignty and use that local support. It's the lowest cost, and it's the most responsive way of doing it. If you need somebody at short notice to sort out a problem, a local service provider is obviously best. For level 3 support, level 4 support, then we suggest that you actually contract with maybe one of the global SIs in the Mojaloop ecosystem to provide that support. Moving on. Product. You need to make sure that the product that you're deploying actually meets your local requirements. So that's not just stability, scalability, and performance baselines, but it's also functionality to make sure they meet the expectations of the DFSPs, of the regulator, of ultimately, dare I say it, the customers. Um, and you can do that through collaboration with the Mojaloop community to help you customize it, and you can also hopefully work with SIs to actually implement it thereafter. Next, infrastructure. I think we've covered this at length already. You need the right infrastructure for the right deployment, and that I think I've already mentioned the ability to flex your infrastructure requirements according to the needs of the service that you're operating. So we have the ability to start small, and as it says here, the infrastructure should be cost effective, and the fact that most regulators currently require that it be on premise or in country at least for data security and sovereignty reasons, then I think that the ability to start relatively small on a handful of servers is a good selling point, and the ability then to flex to two, maybe even three data centers as a nation scale service takes off is a powerful feature of the Mojaloop ecosystem. Next slide, please. Participation, talking to the DFSPs in country to get them to understand what's needed and what the process is, what the steps are from proof of concept through to pilot through to production. Building the right integration model, using the right tools for each DFSP category. And there's a lot of work going on in the Mojaloop community at the moment, as James has already referred to, in terms of making sure we have the right tool for the right DFSP. So a small MFI, for example, might only need the Raspberry Pi based solution, whereas a large commercial bank, EcoBank, for example, they're going to want a multi-server capability within their own data center to ensure the capacity and the reliability that they need. An important aspect of the participation tools that are part of the Mojaloop ecosystem is that they can be they enable a DFSP to be onboarded relatively quickly. I think the record that's been achieved fairly regularly is less than 2 weeks to onboard a mid-sized DFSP, and at very low cost as well. We're not talking about $500,000 per DFSP. We're talking 10,000, something like that. It's very, very cost effective. And I think that's it. So thank you. Thank you, James, for pressing the button. And thank you to anyone who's been listening.